Begin. Good morning to all. It's with great honor that I welcome you all, visitors and members, to 10, the Entrepreneurs Network. I trust you all are comfortable and ready to begin today's meeting. I'm Rahul Amrute, Chairman, shouldering the responsibility of the current tenure. In my task, I'm ably supported by Manoj Taliani, the Secretary, Mangesh Patole, Relationship Manager, and Ram Kumar, who manages our whole social media arrangements. 10, the Entrepreneurs Network is a not-for-profit organization. The single-minded focus of 10 is to help entrepreneurs from different business fields to come together and succeed. So to know more about 10, I would kindly request Mangesh to play a small AV and we can go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes, over to you, Mangesh.
Maharashtra's major industrial town, fastest growing and slated to be the most happening commercial hub. Over the last decade, Thane has grown from a small suburban town to a large self-sustaining metropolis. Proximity to the financial capital of the country has extended ample opportunities to Thane for becoming the richest district in Maharashtra, with potent factors like well-planned infrastructure and low cost of operation. With growing opportunities and upcoming business ventures comes the growing need for business networking to learn, to explore, to connect, and to share avenues for mutual growth. Welcome to the Entrepreneurs Network, popularly known as 10. Established in 2010 with the intent of providing a platform for entrepreneurs to share their experience, to learn, and to educate fellow entrepreneurs, along with generating business opportunities for mutual growth. Our motto: connect, breakthrough, and prosper.
In 2009, basically I was totally confined to the four walls of my own retail outlet. Probably that time I was feeling the need to get out of that those binded four walls. So there was a business networking group. I joined that, and after 1.5 years, basically there was some disconnect with that particular group. So we wanted to start something which was more Indianized. We wanted to do something to build a community of entrepreneurs. And in 2010, we started this 10 Entrepreneurs Network.
10 is a close-knit community of different business verticals across industries.
10 ने मुझे अभी जो फ़ायदा मिला है, काफ़ी फ़ायदा मिला है. बिजनेस अपॉर्चुनिटीज़ भी मुझे काफ़ी मिली है 2009 से. ग्रोथ काफ़ी हुआ है.
I love 10 as a network because it is very different from the other business networks what you see, and it has helped me a lot in my overall development for my business, for my relations.
And what I found, people around us are all wanted to grow in their business and help the society around, and I am so happy to join the 10.
After coming here, I found a different friendship, a different support system.
10 members contribute connections, ideas, and time to help 10 grow. Members are rewarded with training workshops, insights, network, and camaraderie offered by other like-minded entrepreneurs. They meet alternate Wednesdays from 7:15 a.m. to 9:45 a.m.
What I liked about 10 is more of a kind of a learning platform. So I learned a lot from 10, through different sessions, different workshops.
What I like about 10 is core functionality, which is continuous learning for entrepreneurs. That is, we can say it is a core function of 10 on which it operates.
10 has been extremely beneficial to me in enhancing my personality and making me equipped to face the challenges as an entrepreneur.
Connecting, breakthrough, and prosper, which is the mantra of 10, something which is something which I was seeking for in my business career.
10 conducts activities such as 10 Connect session, open minds, outdoor meetings, and annual conclave. 10 Connect session provides a robust platform to its members for learning and sharing experiences, one-on-one interaction, apart from addresses by internal and esteemed guest speakers. 10 Engagement also extends to events such as Open Minds, where established entrepreneurs and business owners are invited to share their life lessons and growth stories while interacting with live audience. It's an event that Thaneites eagerly wait for. Outdoor meetings are fun coupled with learning. It aims at increasing member bonding and interactions beyond regular meetings. It includes site visits, visiting fellow members' workplace, and short outings which are extremely high on fun quotient.
Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, they are exactly following that. That really brings me to here.
Since inception, 10 members have transacted more than 275 crores of business with its members and connects beyond 10. As we move ahead in this path of connecting for mutual growth, we look forward to more heads, more hands, and more hearts to come together. We welcome you to attend the 10 Connect session, to experience entrepreneurial energy, creativity, and motivation.
Let's give our classic 10 clap to 10, which goes 1, 2, 1, 2, 3 twice.
10. The Entrepreneurs Network. Connect, breakthrough, prosper.
Yeah, thanks, Mangesh. I would kindly request Manoj now to introduce our speaker for the day, Kevin Shah. Yes, Manoj.
Thanks, Rahul. It's indeed an honor to introduce Kevin, who's a dear friend, besides being a successful entrepreneur. He's a people's person and understands human psychology that makes him a leader and an indispensable team player. Kevin Shah holds a degree in industrial engineering from the University of Houston. He's a peer thought strategist for upward bound entrepreneurs. He believes in empowered entrepreneurship, one where a future aspirational tone is set at the helm and the culture is people-centric. Besides coaching and mentoring, he's a sought-after motivational speaker. Through his ability to deeply engage with them, creates workable solutions for the company's various long-term needs. His interests being team alignment, evolved strategy, and effective execution. A lot of his insights come from his personal experience of running a successful enterprise for over 25 years. He grew his business of design, engineering, and manufacturing of technically intensive equipment catering to the chemical processing industries, and then sold it to a NASDAQ-listed Swedish MNC after they made an unsolicited offer for his business. I would now kindly request Kevin to begin the exchange of his rich experience and insights for which we have all gathered today. Over to you, Kevin.
We see in the industry who have crossed a particular threshold. But the audience I know in front of here, because I know you guys very well, is a group of very old and matured entrepreneurs with a far, far longer life in the business, and they are still going strong. And the sign of going strong is this networking that you have got. You can call people from the industry to speak. That just shows that you have a strong yearning for learning. So with that, I acknowledge each one of you, and I also salute all of you. With that knowledge, I speak to you today as a friend and a peer from the fraternity. Having said that, now I would like to offer you some very, very powerful thoughts. What I want you to do is that I want you to surrender to the offerings that I'm giving today with a very open mind. And this talk is actually important from the standpoint that it is going to question some of the beliefs that we have accumulated over a period of time, what I call as the generalized faulty beliefs. And therefore, I seek from you a little bit undivided attention. I would like you to have an open mind and leave behind all the ideologies that you carry from the past, because that's the only way I think we could get the best of the few, like let's say the next 45 minutes that we have together. I would also request you that do wear your thinking caps and try to get the context of what I'm offering, because what I'm going to offer you, in that you have to stretch your imagination and extrapolate some of the incidents or the events that I will talk about and bring them into the business situation. I ran my company in the same way whenever I spoke to everyone. And therefore, I don't believe in giving it in a neat, cut and dry manner, because I believe that people have the adequate synthesizing skills to understand and bring the reference to the context. So with that prelude, I want to offer you something very unique. The law of recognition states, the law of recognition states that recognition creates a fixed way of being. And what do I mean by that? So if you are introduced to something in a particular way, you will recognize that in that particular way. And then your entire approach will be in the same way. So I want to give you one example, that loaf of bread. In my last talk also I had explained about this a little bit. Those of you who have heard me before, that the loaf of bread, the technology of baking has been known for centuries. In the earliest of civilization, baking of bread was known. But it was only until 1928, it was only in 1928 that bread was actually sliced for the very first time. And the minute the bread was sliced, guess what happened? A sandwich was born, and today we know it. We have McDonald's and we have Subway and whatever have you. Before that, people got around the table, maybe put some gravy or whatever, butter, and then they ate after tearing the loaf of bread. But when the bread was sliced, as a Freakonomic effect, the amount of consumption of bread actually went up by about 6 times and eventually to 30 times. At that time, in 1928, the US government had come up with a law that slicing of bread was illegal. Can you believe that? Slicing of bread was made illegal. Now, knowing that slicing of bread cannot be controlled, so it actually resulted into innovations in agriculture, and finally we are here today, where we have bread is all ubiquitous, it's all around. So with this little getting out of this recognition, because we recognized bread as a loaf of bread and it continued for centuries, and with this little change, we have now seen so much of potential. This is not just with respect to the objects. Imagine that there is this chairman who has a lot of work to do, and the chairman is sitting over there and the light has gone. There is darkness and he's grumbling and complaining that there is no light. And of course, there is a spare bulb over there. But what he is struggling with is that there is no ladder to go up. And so, just when he's going about complaining that there's so much of work to do and there is all darkness and things like that, a person walks in and asks him, how important is it for you to get going and working? And the person says it is extremely important. So what does this person do? This person says, if you would excuse me, let me step on your chair, Mr. Chairman, and he changes the bulb and enlightens the entire room. I think a lot of people are trapped in this title that they carry, and therefore their ownership restricts themselves merely to the title, and not realizing that more often than not, that chair is actually a ladder to move up. So today, now, to getting into the thick of the things, I want to leave you with this thought that you from today have another title, and that is that you are a thought leader. And now what exactly does thought leadership mean is for you to ponder over. You see, most of us have experienced this, that we are at a particular level. Let's, for bringing in an example, let's say you are in the 7th grade and you are capable and competent, and therefore you do well, and eventually you go to the 8th grade. And even while you are collecting all these congratulations and whatever have you, deep down inside, you are a little bit nervous. You are a little bit nervous because you are feeling that you are now a bit incompetent to handle the things at the higher level. And soon enough, you are with your capability, people are there to teach you, your seniors or whatever, your teachers or whatever, and you are able to overcome that incompetence with your capability and go to the next level. Immediately on getting that one promotion, you are once again feeling nervous, you feel the incompetence, And once again, you have to learn the things with your capability from whoever out there to teach you, you learn, and finally you are promoted again. But this keeps on happening until we reach a point in time where we reach a level of incompetence. And when we reach that level of incompetence, we are looking outside from friends and whatever to help, but it's not helping us. And therefore, we have reached a level of maximum incompetence, and we are the bottleneck. And this is carried forward even in the real world. And the head that wears the crown, therefore, becomes the heaviest. Such people, when in that situation, decide to not decide. And life is suddenly coming from outside the syllabus and shot at you at point blank range. You cannot play even when you know all the rules of the game. So it's time now to own the game and change the rules of the game and set a new narrative. I repeat, when you reach that stage where all those around you cannot teach you, even when you know the game, you have to now really own the game in the true authentic sense and change the rules and set the new narrative. Park this thought, it will be summoned later in the talk. So I also want to offer you something, that if you know what to do, friends, if you know what to do, you will always have a job. If you know what, where, or when to do, you will always have a job. If you know how to do that, what, where, and when, then you will perhaps be more senior. However, eventually, when you go up there, if you know why you do what you do, or why you don't do, even when you can do, in that case, you will go even higher. I repeat, if you know what to do, where to do, when to do, you will always have a job. If you know how to do that what, where, and when better, you will be promoted and go to the higher position. But there is a timing point where you reach, and if you know why you do what you do, or why you don't do, even when you can do, you have reached that point where there is no oxygen. And here I mean that there is no, the straightforwardness of decision making is missing. There is no rationality or logic available to take that decision. And therefore, you are left at the mercy of your own wisdom. I want to give you a very powerful example, and I want you to get in the game. I want you to imagine yourselves to really have been, up there. I want you guys to imagine that you are the Prime Minister of India. Imagine yourself to be that Prime Minister of India. And by the way, an average Prime Minister, his term is only 5 years. Whereas we in business understand, have to be going much further in the journey. So in that 5 years, I want to bring you to the real life situation now. Imagine yourself to be the Prime Minister, and on 26th of January, you got to know that there was this farmers' protest rally. It has broken all the barriers that were put, and they are headed towards Delhi. And finally, they have reached at the foothills of the Red Fort, right at the entrance. And along the way, around 590 police have actually been injured who tried to stop them. And they are charging towards the Red Fort. Now let us understand one thing, Mr. Prime Minister, that if in a democracy, if they say that the parliament is the temple, then the Red Fort, where prime ministers like you and the prime ministers before you have all been giving the national address and hoisting the national flag, then that place is also not any less sacred. So my question to you, Mr. Prime Minister, that this is the day where the whole India is watching, the world's eyes are on India, and you are seeing a situation where the most sacred place where you had just spoken a little while ago is going to be perhaps desecrated, and they are heading up towards the Red Fort where you had hoisted the national flag. My question to you, sir, or Madam Prime Minister, what would you do if you get a call to make a decision that you have been outnumbered in terms of your security forces? The only option available to you is to give the order to fire. Would you give that order? Is the question, Prime Minister, sir, madam. What would you do? Well, from what I have usually seen, I have asked this question when this has happened. Because we are all very good at commenting for other people out there without being in their shoes. Today you are in that shoes, and I had asked this question, and we need to understand one thing, that the Prime Minister did not fire. But I am asking you, what would you do? I have heard this when I ask people around, that they have given answers such as, oh, we shouldn't do it. They are our people, our own citizens, and things like that. And I have also heard people who say that fire, I would say just you need to blast them with bombs. This is the kind of extremes I have seen. And then I've heard something in between, which is nothing but fudging the thing. Well, no, we should have thought of this from before. We should not have given them the permission to protest. We should have kept more security guards, etc., etc. But the point is, all that's behind us. I am asking you to take the decision whether rubber meets the road. They are outnumbered, and that's all in the past. There is a lot of merit in just talking of the past, but that merit is not truly going to deserve any reality. It's only washing the emotional laundry in public. It does not really make anything happy or clean. So did our Prime Minister not decide, or did he decide to not decide? After all, this Prime Minister is known to change the game. He's taken certain decisions which are well known. One rank, one pension, pending for 40 years, demonetization as large as that, GST pending for a few decades, the triple talaq, the surgical strike. In spite of being in the space program leading country, for the first time we said we are in the game, and we knocked off our own satellite, telling that the game is on because the other superpowers had already done that. We said we are also in that front, not just in land, water, and sea. Land, sea, and sky. We've taken it.
370.
Sorry?
370, Article 370.
Article 370. Many such decisions have been taken. And these have all been. So the point is that the person is capable of taking decisions. This is where I'm coming from. But he did not fire. So the question is that, did he take a political decision to not fire, or did he take a principled decision to not fire? And today you are the Prime Minister, I'm actually asking you. So was it a political decision, or was it a principled decision? And he's up there where the straightforwardness of the logic is not available to you guys either. It's not available. You need to decide. So you park this thought there, whether it was a principled decision or whether it was a political decision. But I would like you to think for a moment that instead of being the Prime Minister of India, if you were in a country like, say, America, say Russia, say Iran, say Saudi Arabia, say Israel, say China, okay? What would have they done during this situation? I think you know the answer. You would have considered yourself in those countries a tad easier to take certain decision. Understand how unique our country is, how unique we are, and therefore we need to understand who we are. So a good point to start, when I asked you that was it a political decision or a principled decision, a good starting point is to explore this word principles. And a good starting point would be to figure out how these valuable principles are made, assuming it was a principled decision. And since we are in a class of distinctions, I would like to offer you the distinction which is sometimes interchangeably used between the worth and the values. Listen carefully. So now the bread is here, the slice of bread is right here. And therefore it is ubiquitous, it is available everywhere. It's available at the corner shop. Sometimes even the panwala is selling a bread with it. It's available everywhere. And therefore, the worth of if you have a few slices of bread, the worth of that bread is not much. However, if you are stuck in a cave and the cave has collapsed and you are stuck inside and you know that they are coming in to get you, but it is going to cost them some few days to reach you. There is some water, maybe underground stream is there, which is coming up like a spring. So you have the water and the only thing you have now is just a few slices of bread in that dark cave. So all of a sudden, that same few slices of bread, which were worthless, are becoming valuable to you. In fact, invaluable, because you have to survive on them. In the normal circumstances, principles at the lower level, when you're handling, you have really not too much worth of it. It is only that in the darkness, when there is less oxygen, there is less light, then these values come handy. The point where I'm asking is that we need to now figure out that how do these leaders, instead of cursing the darkness, how do they light the candle with their principles? So coming back, how are principles made? Let us summon a bit of our scriptures. Narad Muni had got the boon to travel in time, distance, and space. And when he traveled in time, distance, and space, he once decided to enter Ram Rajya. And when he went into Ram Rajya, what he found was that in Ram Rajya, there was no stealing, there was no robbing, there was no thieving. Everything was in order and led none other but by Ram himself. And people revered him. And he thought perhaps that's the order. And then he traveled using his boon of time, distance, and space, and he went into Krishna Rajya. And what did he find? In the Krishna Rajya, led by none other than Krishna himself. As a child, Krishna was found to be stealing butter, makhan chor that he is. As he grew a little bit older, as he became a teenager, his mother told him not to go in the river because there is a poisonous snake there. He decided to go straight there only. As a teenager, he grew a little bit older. As a young adolescent, he would hide the clothes of the gopis when they are taking a bath. And then he grew a little bit older and he flirted with so many of them. So what I want to offer you before I tell you how principles are made is that a responsible person adheres to the principles. However, a mature person is the one that applies the principles in the continually changing present moment. We must understand that in the continually changing present moment, Krishna was aligned to his nature. And therefore, what he did is valid in that sequence only, in that age only. If you change what he was doing in another age, it is not acceptable. It is at that time and point, it is his wisdom to do what he wants. So now, having known that a mature person lives responsibly with the principles, a responsible person lives with the principles, he adheres to that, whereas a mature person applies them in a continually changing moment. Let's now figure out how principles are actually made. In order to understand how principles are made, we need to find out what are the materials that are used to make it. Well, for that, we need to understand morals and ethics. Morals. So if I was to ask you what is the moral and what is an ethic, and we tend to use them also interchangeably, So moral, friends, is that if I asked you that would you ever kill anyone? And I'm sure you all will say that you will never kill anyone. Thou shalt not kill. Well, that is embedded in morals. However, if you happen to be a soldier, it becomes your ethical duty to kill the enemy in the war. And that is why we say that soldiers are killers, yet not murderers. Right? So, morals are decided in the self reality. They are in isolation. However, ethics is respect to the other. Ethics is respect with respect to others. So morals, perhaps we can say, if you look at a river, the morals is the foundational river bed, the floor, and perhaps the ethics is perhaps the walls of the river. And if you take this, if moral is about the good and the bad, and if the ethics is about the right and the wrong, then it is the good, the bad, the right, the wrong. You combine all of this and you use this to reason, to decide, and to act. Okay? That's where the principles start forming. Principles, my friends, are extremely personal to us. They are made with a cognitive construct which is only we understand. It's in our personal cognitive construct. Reasoning in that is the psychological understanding that comes in. When I said that you reason, you decide, and then act, the reasoning in that comes as a psychological understanding that we have that comes through observing, through perceiving, through learning, and through deeply contemplating. So now I want you to imagine another situation. You have already taken a decision as a soldier. As an ordinary citizen, you have decided you will not kill. As a soldier, you said you better kill. Now I want you to imagine that there is this war, and in that war, there is a unique situation where you are coming face to face with the enemy soldier. You are coming face to face with the enemy soldier, and guess what happens? When you come close, you both are facing each other, and that enemy soldier is about to kill you. But just about he's about to kill you and you to kill him, the enemy soldier coincidentally steps on maybe a rock or some pebbles, and he slips and falls, and his gun is fallen down, and you are able to capture this person. Well, when you capture this person, what is it that you are going to do? And for that, we need to again come out with a new distinction, which is the distinction between need and want, because principles are serving our needs. So friends, your need is to win the war. Your want is to destroy anyone that's stopping that. I repeat, your need is to win the war. Your want is to eliminate anyone that's stopping that. The soldier who you were about to kill is no longer able to stop you. And therefore, as a prisoner of war, it is your principal stand. It is your principal stand that you will now not kill him. Understand what's going on. A while ago, you said you will never kill. Then you said as a soldier, I would in a battle. Now you are about to kill in a battle. You've captured that fellow. You are not going to kill him. In fact, it is your principal duty to take him to the hospital and give him first aid if he is so injured. And God forbid, if that person dies, then as an honorable soldier, you are expected to give him the funeral that another soldier so deserves. So what I'm trying to tell you, that principles are like the river, whereby the river is the same, the water keeps changing moment to moment in the continual changing present moment. Siddhant, principle or Siddhant as we say, it depends on the samay, the sthal, the sthiti, the sandarbh, and the sanskriti. Meaning the time, the place, the situation, the context, and the culture. These are some of the major variables, but they keep on changing. And these are all not static. They all keep changing with time. And in that, you have to make your cognitive constructs, basically, to decide between the good, bad, right, wrong, and then you have to use that to reason, to decide, and then finally act. So people talk of morals and ethics a lot, and they talk of following the rules. How do you frame rules for these things? Today, and these are the applications in life. I said, you please imagine yourself to doing this in business. I want you to extrapolate a little. Today, we talk a lot about the Constitution. And we say that we trying to behave like lawyers, basically, who keeps looking at this Constitution. It would surprise and shock some of you. It would surprise and shock some of you that United Kingdom has no codified constitution as we understand it in India. They have no constitution like that. It works as they have agreed on certain principles where they arise from the traditions, the conventions, the guidelines, and the past events that have happened. They use these as an input factor, if not a force, to decide in the present and apply it over here. Can you even imagine that? I want to offer you some very, very powerful example, which will make you understand the futility of tying ourselves with certain wrong beliefs. Abraham Lincoln, the President of America, he had actually declared a civil war. And in that civil war, believe it or not, 620,000 Americans had died. That is more than World War I and World War II put together. 550,000 had died during World War I and World War II. In this, 620,000 people were killed. And mind you, the Constitution did not allow him to do that. And with so much of death, I can tell you there is nothing moral about it, nor there is something ethical about it, because there was no code of conduct to follow as per the Constitution. In fact, the Constitution had stood abrogated. He was, in fact, assassinated. But years later, when they discussed it, they realized that yes, what he did is he took a principled stand. He did not follow the morals or ethics. He took a principled stand. And in that principled stand, he wanted to free the African slaves who were brought from overseas and they were not treated properly. So he wanted to abolish slavery. And these lawmakers, for this lawbreaker, Mr. Abraham Lincoln, they have built a Lincoln Memorial right outside where the lawmakers meet in Washington, D.C. And his picture is found on a $50 bill. Years later, when Barack Obama became the President of America, he so decided that when he takes an oath, he will ask for 2 Bibles, and therefore he took 2 oaths. And he actually called for that same Bible on which Abraham Lincoln had put his hand while being sworn in. So we need to understand that this, in that moment, maybe people felt whatever it is, and therefore he was assassinated. But it was a principled stand he took, and he went against everyone, and he did what he did. And now we are seeing that he's actually being honored. So I want to offer you something to bring it, bring a more detail into this. I want you to understand the futility of certain things that our generalized faulty beliefs that have come about. So we have this particular incident that took place recently, which caught my eye. I always like to draw examples from real world. Pinia Kisto at Mombasa in Kenya. Pinia Kisto was a lady in Kenya, and she had turned into a widow. A few months ago, her husband had died, and she had no way to feed her kids. And in the midst of all that adversity which was going on in her personal life, there was this coronavirus lockdown in Kenya, which meant that there was absolutely nothing to eat. This lady, when there was nothing to eat, and she had her children who were crying in the night for food, she told them that food is being cooked. Please be patient. She told her children that. Actually, what she did, she took some water in a kettle, she put some stones, and she started cooking the stones, knowing fully well that there is no food. But she told her children a lie. She was not locked in this morality. She told her children that she is cooking food. It so happened that somebody was passing by, and fortunately that person was not from the Indian media, and therefore that person actually felt for this person, and they said, "Oh my God, it is such a such a heavy sight over there. There's his mother is lying to the child and trying to tell the child go to sleep. Food is being cooked." Person felt, and therefore that person tried to collect money to help this lady over there. And one person told another, and another told another, and finally it reached their press, and it reached worldwide. And finally BBC made it into world news, and she became the face for the the affected due to adversity during of the coronavirus lockdown. Now, of course, she was lying. There was no morality on that. But what she did was very moralistic, because she knew at that stage that she anyways cannot provide food to her children. But she at least didn't want them to go without sleep either. If there is no food, food may be available tomorrow, but if they keep wailing the whole night, maybe they will get God knows what kinds of nightmares, or if they have to fall asleep, or how it will have what psychological impact it will have on them. So while the morality was broken, the end result was for a larger cause. I want to give you another example with respect to ethics. That one was with morals. During the concentration camps, during when the Nazis were ruling in Germany, and they were doing all these atrocities on Jews, actually what was happening was that everybody was following the order, the written code, or what they are supposed to do. And on the ethics, they were completely okay. As per the Kauravas in the disrobe of Draupadi, as per the rules of the game, what they were doing is correct. And a lot of people, therefore, we see they are lakir ke fakir and this procedure ke pujari. What is wrong in this is that while in the former case of Phinia Khisto, in the former case, while she was morally wrong, she was passing in principles. But in the latter case, while the people were intact in their ethics, they were failing in principles. And friends, I'm coming to an end of my talk, but the dangers of application of these morals and ethics are extremely real. The youthful indiscretion has taken fancy of many of such, let's call them for a moment, innocently wrong notions. And I think this overpowering grip of this morality and ethics perhaps they arise from our schooling, where we were kept in uniform and life moved in rhythms of school bells. And then we grew up with these notions of unlimited equality and fairness in society. I want to ask you, and I'm sure you will say yes, there should be fairness and equality everywhere. I want to ask you, where do you see equality in nature? No two trees having the exact same sunlight, exact same water, exact same soil, exact same weather conditions are identical. Forget two trees, two flowers or two fruits on the exact same tree are not equal. Friends, each flower blooms to its own potential. And therefore, this is a failed idea of equality. And wherever people have tried to force equality, they have achieved exactly the opposite. There is a strong movement, which is a failed idea, but it is gaining ground. And when you try to deliver equal distribution of wealth in this manner, with these wrong notions, you will end up distributing equal poverty. I want to therefore offer you something very powerful. That you cannot ever demand equal outcomes. Outcomes is what comes out of you. What you can demand, that you get equal opportunity. Even when there was a blatant exploitation, let's say in Zimbabwe or in South Africa, we need to follow that how this blatant, why I'm calling it blatant is because in the jungle law is saying exploitation is okay. If a lion is there and a hyena is there, then the hyena runs. If there is a pack of hyenas, the lion has to run. Right is might. But there was not only exploitation, there was also discrimination in Kenya, in Zimbabwe, sorry, and in South Africa. And in Zimbabwe, the means to achieve that equality, where they tried to seize everything and make everything equal, and they completely failed because it was an unprincipled way. Whereas the same thing in South Africa, under Nelson Mandela, their means were highly principled. So even when there was exploitation and even when there was discrimination, the means to achieve your end are in that also you need to have principles. Nelson Mandela declared it that we are not going to seize everything for the people who have more. He decided to make it a rainbow nation, and therefore he continued symbolically to continue to have his white guards to guard him. He said, okay, now we'll forget all what has happened and we move in a principled manner. The guards that were overlooking him now suddenly were looking after him. This was the very principled stand he took. So therefore, I want to tell you that if you are an underprivileged person, if you are doing a job, if you are that tree, you can demand that equal opportunity. Okay, you can demand equal opportunity. As a tree, you can say, I want, same amount of maybe soil and water and sunlight, but you cannot demand equal outcomes. Outcomes is what comes out of you. It is what you produce. And if you are a person of seniority, then it is of a privileged position. It is therefore your principal duty, perhaps, to offer an equal opportunity. And based on the outcome, you begin to reward the deserving rather than always help the needy. And that, friends, is extremely fair. So now, Mr. Prime Minister, I want to ask you this very, very important question. We are back in the game where we started. If the farmers now come back, as they have said, that if this is not sorted by October, if the farmers decide that they come back, as they have said, they will come in October, and this time they will go to the Parliament. Prime Ministers, Mr. Prime Minister, Mrs. Prime Minister, what would you do? This is the question to you. You are at that helm in a high position, and you've been told that the farmers, if this is not sorted by October, then 5 lakh tractors are heading towards the Parliament. What would you do? I do not know what our Prime Minister will do, but I want to offer you my concluding part, which is very, very important, which brings this whole thing into context. In the middle of the Mahabharata battle, Arjun ran into some similar situation as you, Mr. or Mrs. Prime Minister. He told his charioteer that, to stop and he cannot move forward. And when the charioteer asked, you all know the story, what is the reason? You know the epic. And he said that I see that on the other side are my cousins, my uncles, and my teachers. And at that time, the charioteer changed his form and revealed who he is and told him that the boat that you are talking of has long left that port. Do you not see your cousins, uncles, and teachers on how they see you is the larger question. That how do they see you is the question he asked. That boat has left that port long ago. When you are saying, I'm seeing my uncles, my teachers, my cousins, how do they see you? Do they see you as a cousin, as a nephew, or as a student? You did what you did, and finally you went and asked back for your kingdom, which was due to you, as per the rules. You followed the rules, now you ask them to follow the rules. Did they follow the rules? Did you ask back your kingdom? You did. They denied. You asked for half the kingdom. They denied. You asked for quarter kingdom. They denied. You asked for 1/10 the kingdom. They denied. You asked for just 5 villages. They denied. You asked for 1 village with 5 houses. They denied. You asked for 1 house with 5 rooms. They denied. Kauravas have kept denying. Are you now not encouraging a behavior on the other side? Is this not a property? Is this a property dispute? A principal decision will have to be taken by you. This is no longer a dispute of real estate. The government had these laws in the manifesto. They had promised that these laws will come out in the manifesto. They offered 11 meetings. They agreed to review each one clause by clause. They agreed to give them 18 months of extra time to discuss among themselves and come back. And to avoid the crowding because there is a situation of COVID. And they even agreed that if you still want to protest, then you may do your protest rally on the 26th January. The government has allowed that. The question is, I see them as citizens. How do you see yourselves? Is the question. I do not know how you would decide or our Prime Minister will decide, but you will run into such situations in your company. And therefore, I want to tell you that Krishna, we are coming to the distilled message from this, that Krishna did not even order Arjuna on what to do. He merely presents the gap. He merely presents the gap in Arjun's understanding. Krishna did not order Arjun, he merely presents the gap in Arjun's understanding. And friends, Arjun was immediately enrolled and decided to act. And what is that gap? That either if you want to be successful, either you will have to sin and deliver justice, or you will have to remain unsinful and injustice prevail. I will repeat, either you will have to sin and successfully deliver justice, or you will have to remain unsinful and let the injustice prevail. This, friends, is inevitable to the humans. In business or anywhere else, friends, the world will worship your success only. But the road to success is made difficult not because by the world, but because by ourselves. It is ironical. There's an irony in that, and the irony is that because for success you need to act, but when you act, in that moment, the rational world, which includes you or yourself, is soaked in morality and ethics, and so will vote against yourself. For success, you will have to take action. For action, you will need to take decision. For decision, you will need a criteria. For a principled decision, you will need to take a principled criteria. And principles, my friends, principles depends on the time, place, situation, context, and culture formed only and only under your cognitive construct in your game. So in that moment, whenever you do decide, it is possible that the whole world will be against you, but you will still be able to look yourself in the mirror and you say that I took a decision for the long term. You will be able to give yourself the hard justice on the soft pillow. Friends, it is in the midst of the Kurukshetra. That Krishna had to walk out of mythology and step into history and show his authentic avatar to make Arjun own up his own avatar, the avatar of a Kshatriya, And until that moment, Arjun had everything with him. He had the army, he had the armaments, and he had his armor on. But he did not have his relevant avatar, that of a Kshatriya. All he had was that he was a cousin, a nephew, and a student, but not a soldier. And only when he owned himself that avatar, that of a Kshatriya, that his confusion melted, cousins, uncles, and teachers disappeared. He saw himself as a warrior facing warriors out to kill him. He realized that it's a clash of the narratives and he has to set his own narrative. Detached from the non-relevant avatars, Arjun lifted his bow. Friends, हर भगवान के पास तलवार, तीर और त्रिशूल है. But it may be noted that Mahabharata was the last and the final port of call. It was only triggered after exhausting all other avenues. यही हमारी भारतीयता है. Friends, I want to tell you that it is time that you unshackle yourself. You have to unshackle yourselves from the naive morality and ethics, which we all have, taken into our mainstream life. And these moralities and ethics, if they have no relevance in your current avatar, and if it is not serving you for the larger good of your organization, then you need to break the shackles of that. Realize that each avatar has its own uddesh or purpose, and therefore, with that, a dharma to achieve that uddesh or the purpose. And when we call ourselves business owners, my question to you is, have we really owned that exclusive identity of our own? And when I say I am a business owner, do I really own it? And I don't mean owners of land or building or machinery. Only when we realize that we are not just the shareholders, but also the stakeholders, then we become the employee number one in our own organization. Only when we define and emphatically project our purpose in that identity, only when we project emphatically our purpose in that identity, will our dharma unfold. And as thought leaders, we set the tone of the organization down below. And that tone is principled criteria. And in that tone, the principled criteria shall show up at each and every stage. It will just emerge. Dharma, for our understanding in the real world, before I get to that, we must understand that dharma is the inalienable and the innate thing that defines us. The sun's purpose, for example, is to give light, and therefore its dharma is to burn non-stop. So with reference to our lives, dharma has been defined in the real world as all that is required: the right, the responsibilities, the duties, the conducts, the customs, the virtues, the orders, the phenomena, as applicable to the ways of doing business for a business owner for achieving the larger purpose of his or her business. At the end of Mahabharata, Krishna was asked, ये सब क्यों किया आपने? ये आपका उद्देश्य क्या था? And he said, मैंने जो भी किया, मैंने हस्तिनापुर के कल्याण के लिए किया. Even God had to go through this banthan, and it is inevitable. So I come back and tell you the earlier question I had asked, that is it politics or is it principles? Gandhiji had famously said that politics is not a sin. Politics without principles is a sin. These are not separate. One has to be serving the other. So, in conclusion, I would like to recap, and then I'm open to questions. Question number 1. Okay. Let me recap. Rather, submission number 1. We must recognize our avatar and our game. In that avatar, we must define a purpose. Once the purpose is owned, with aligned to the identity, our dharma will show up to achieve it, and principles will be followed. Morals and ethics are the building blocks. They are the many beams and columns, but they are not the structure itself. In your unique game, the principles are all yours. They are your refuge and your guiding North Star. Failure is not wanted by anyone. Success, however, has many fathers. The world is wedded only to your benefits and the bonuses in each avatar. To achieve that, the churn is inevitable. And finally, let Mahabharata be your last port of call. Once you are committed to it as the last and final port of call, then after that, Sam Dam Danda Bhed is a very natural consequence. So taking inspiration, friends, from mythology, history, politics, let's enter into the real world. Let us understand one thing. Let us understand that business is not a quarter-to-quarter game. Even 31st March is just a man-made milestone and not the destination. The sun keeps rotating and revolving beyond that. It does not stop because you reached your 31st March. Business is a long-term game. And you are in that long-term game. Your business is expected to outlast you. If you are in the business of doing business, nothing is going to happen. You are in the business to build an institution. You don't want to build a business just to close it. The business is supposed to outlast you. And for that, you will need all the emotional stamina. You cannot put in your paper in your own company, and therefore only a positive narrative which serves you can be projected by you in that company. Even if you want to sell your business, you must first own it. And there is wisdom in believing that businesses are never sold, they are bought. And it is your tragedy, and therefore it has to be your strategy. The strategy, I can tell you, rests on 3 legs, and the tripod is that of your identity, your purpose, and your principal duty. You have to find that strategy yourself, or alternatively, you can find yourself a peer thought strategist. What does a peer thought strategist do? He will or she will guide you through deep engagement and help you discover your core values buried deep within you and bring them to the surface. He or she will also be able to recognize your wealth creating personality patterns. These also shall be ascertained. Both of these put together are very innate and inalienable to you. Unknown to you, you are already using them. But once your peer thought strategist finds them for you, the peer thought strategist will try to validate them with your help and finally offer to you as a larger self-recognizing, empowering identity. That asset will alone serve you in setting your company's purpose, a definitive future positive purpose that will set the narrative. Then you will be guided through the processes in the company, which shall be sandwiched and aligned between you, the person, and the purpose. The processes will be aligned and sandwiched between you, the person, and the purpose. The employees so aligned with that will be attracted to you and will stay and become your team. Jointly, they will start learning, leading, and volunteering in the company's growth. In conclusion, friends, decision making, therefore, it is either easy once you get this, or it is impossible, but it is never difficult. Sure, to live is to suffer, whether it be business or anywhere else. But to find a meaning in your suffering is to really survive. He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. And it is the why that we must pursue. With that, I'm open to your questions, and I want you to ask questions with respect to the business. Thank you.
Participants, I have allowed you all to unmute yourself. So if anyone has a question, you all can please unmute yourself and ask the question to Mr. Kevin M. Shah.
Some questions were also asked on the chat box. So Mangesh, if you can also take them, it would be good.
Yeah, Rahul. Kevin, I have a question for you. I will take the question over chat box
Please, thank you.
Okay, you have gone through your entrepreneurial journey, and at the end, you had successfully sold to a Swedish Nasdaq listed company. So, in your journey, have you come across a situation, okay, when you are forced to take a decision which was not ethically right, but morally and vice versa?
Yes and no. Yes, if you say so, but what I told you earlier, that I am surrendering myself to the well-being of my organization. And when I told you that Mahabharata was the last call, my job is to conquer the market. If I'm not able to conquer, then I'm reduced to perhaps trying to convince the market, perhaps to confuse the market, and then perhaps whatever it took. But what I am offering to you is that you are not the initiator of such things. You are going to respond. You are playing the ball. You are not keeping an eye on the scoreboard and therefore playing. You are playing in the now. That's why I said to you that this is an infinite game. You are in no hurry. And therefore, if you run into a situation, which you all have, that if you walk straight on a crooked street and you are going to be arrested for being drunk when you are not, then you do not be a martyr without a cause. Your larger responsibility is for the survival of your organization. And therefore, this should be very clear. Because if you change the order, and if you say that, well, it's a little bit here and there is okay, if that's the message which is going down, then what starts as a 1 millimeter leeway at your end, by the time it goes to the last person, it is perhaps a mile, and nothing will be in order. And therefore, you have to set a very strong tone on where you stand, and therefore you take a principled stand. So if you wish to, if you wish to take a decision, it is going to be taken only by yourself, and people will not be able to understand that from outside. Now, I don't want to give you the incidents or give you the names of what has happened, but yes, like any one of you, you run into situations, and there is no country in the world which it does not, including Sweden, which is considered to be -- perhaps in the Human Development Index and all sorts of index. After occupying the business, after business was acquired, I was there. I was heading that company for 3 years. So this is very important for us to understand that we have to have the sequence correct. And our port of call, as we understand, is the first port of call or the last port of call.
Thank you, Kevin. Next question we have from our own 10 members, Sumo Banerjee. His question is that when a company fires an employee in a difficult time but posts good no profit in books of account, is it company taking a moral decision or an ethical decision? Because shareholder take profit because he took the risk. In that case, employee took the risk. So his question is whether company is in right while firing an employee, although despite of having the profit in books of account.
See, when I said that you set the narrative in your company, and therefore the question is that as a human being, what is your competitive edge? See, being human only itself is your competitive edge. And in that, your competitive edge is not just to win, but also to serve. Or rather, I would say you win through service. So my question to you is very simple, that if you fired that person, the person should feel and that justice has been delivered. Because when you fire one employee, you please understand all the other employees are watching. And therefore, I told you that what is your purpose? You need to therefore have a narrative, and is it your first port of call or your last port of call? And are you in the business to make profit? I already told you, you are not here to be. The profit is a consequence. It's a desired byproduct. When you get that deep inside you, that you do whatever you have to, then everybody contributes. In my company, just to give you an idea, in my company of 43 years, we have never fired anyone when the company did bad, or there were very bad situations in terms of let's say sales not happening. It's a cyclical business and things do happen. But we did talk to the team and we said that, this is what the situation is, and let's do what we can to make the company survive, because I am also an employee number one, and therefore I took the biggest cut, and we all took a cut, and we all tried to make the company run. And there was a time where I said that what should be the amount, and my senior managers gave an amount larger than what I could have given. And then we took a stand that, and then 1 year there was no increments, nor there was the what we used to call it as the egg ratio, or the bonus equivalent of that was given, and it was quite okay. Having said that, we have had a situation sometimes after 2 or 3 counseling where we had to ask people to leave because they were not aligned to it. And therefore, when you set a very strong narrative, more often than not, in the first, second, or third counseling, people anyways leave if they are not fit to the ideology of the company. And it's very important to therefore set the ideology up, because you are attracting the right kind of people. But to adjust your balance sheets based on people, which means you are playing the role only of a shareholder and not the stakeholder. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Certainly you are. Thank you, Kevin. Friends, you can just unmute yourself and ask the question.
Mangesh, there was, I think, some question by some Dubey. I don't remember the first name.
I don't see any question on chat box. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Pooja Dubey, can you please unmute yourself and ask any question if you have? It's not allowing her to unmute, Ram. Can you unmute, Pooja?
Done that.
Yeah, Pooja, you unmute.
You said that we must play in the game and not watch the scoreboard while we are doing it. But at the same time, the world acknowledges you for the results and not for your efforts. In situations when you feel that your play is not giving immediate results and your game is going to be long, how long would it be wise enough time to keep that belief that you will get there and get the desired results when the current results are not marking much progress?
It's a very good question, and this is in fact the other pandemic out there where people are considering that the achievement is only with respect to the sales, and it is not with respect to the growth. To me, the sales is a consequence. The scoreboard is a consequence if you kept your eye on the ball. The global financial crisis had actually happened because they wanted to keep an eye on the scoreboard, and they therefore had to somehow or the other make those sales. And when you cannot find a good customer, then you go to your subprime customer and start selling whatever you have to. If you are focused only and only on sales and you push your team down below, then you are really not in the long-term game, because you are not trying to build the institution. You are merely trying to do a transactional business. And in that, you are going to have a loss of 3 things. One of the 3 things, either you will start supplying stuff which is substandard because you just want to raise an invoice. Either you will compromise on your core values, right? Or you will compromise on your health because you say, I don't give a damn. I need these sales and I need you to work till 12 in the night. It brings back to the other question where someone said that, which Mangesh was reading out, that can I fire people to adjust the balance sheet? Well, that person will definitely not be able to call this person at 12 o'clock, because if there's a quid pro quo kind of a relationship with the employees, then no employee comes with their heart to leave their family and work for the company till 12. They will not. Therefore, we have to understand that we need to work from a model of abundance, that I can give you salary and there are many other things I can offer you. You see, a person stays in the company so if they have learning, earning, dignity and respect. The person should feel sense of, why does someone work for you? And therefore, why should someone be able to give you that result? If they are working for the short term, and if you are only going to say scoreboard is important, then that same person will leave you the minute the scoreboard falls. And at that time, you really may not want that person to leave. Your main critical guy, because that's all you've been teaching them. Therefore, it's a model of scarcity. And a person will work, as I was saying, only if they experience that there is a sense of perceived control, perceived progress, perceived connectivity, and finally perceived service to something larger than just a profit. That's what I'm telling you. I told you that we need to make the processes aligned and sandwiched between the person and the purpose. More often than not, what we end up doing is that we end up putting you, the person, between policy and punishment. Because now you make a policy, as per policy, you give a punishment to one employee, the second employee you can't give because he's very important now. You fired one, the second one you can't. Alright, he's also coming late to work now. What to do? Or I'm not firing now. You have trapped yourself in this. And therefore, the narrative has to be very clear. We are all trapping ourselves in what I call as a generalized faulty beliefs. And therefore, you completely change the narrative. Then you make individuals into groups, and they will work to that goal. Do not worry about outside. That's why when I say that be an empowered entrepreneurship, the empowerment comes only once you realize that you are whole, complete, joyous, with no missing parts. And therefore, whoever is telling you are incomplete, the outside world, has a problem. That person has a problem. You should be, it's a clash of the narratives. And you will have that emotional stamina to take it through.
Thank you, Kevin. Next question is from Mr. Manoj Agarwal. Manoj, you can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting session, Kevin. It's something that I've also been studying. My question is this, and my confusion is this. So there is a set of principles obviously out there, but that depends from family to family, society to society, country to country. So there's a whole set of religion to religion. So which set of principles kind of should one accept as a business person? And then there is also your inner voice. And also I've experienced that my inner voice changes over that period of time. So as a kid, I had one inner voice. As an adult, it's different. As an older person, now it's different. So this is all very confusing as to how do you figure out what is the right approach. I mean, Arjun had Krishna, he was fortunate. What do we do in this confusion?
It is your tragedy and therefore your strategy. Sometimes you can appoint a peer thought strategist. That's what you can do. But on a more serious note, what you have said is not the problem of yours. That has been there since ever. And it is the clash of narratives. The famous saying that one country's freedom fighter is the other country's terrorist. It's a fact. And therefore each one is, that is where I'm telling you, you have to therefore be very powerful in your narrative. And that power doesn't come until you are able to find your core values. You are able to frame, it's all about framing. You need to see, I told you about this law of recognition. Like law of recognition creates a fixed way of being. We are all locked in certain it's a rat race. We are all trapped in certain, this recognition. If we are trapped, then let it be the world's best mouse trap. And therefore, I would rather want to trap myself, which is my own creation, which serves me. And therefore, I tell you that you need to ultimately have your core values, and you need to use those core values to serve your purpose. Now, people say, I'm confused, like you said. So I say that, okay, if your core value is kindness, if your core value is kindness, and your purpose is in that avatar that when you are at home, that I have to serve my family. A person who sees his father who's perennially ill, suffering with a lot of pain, unbearable pain, cannot sleep in the night, and there is no scope left. is in the hospital with oxygen and with all these tubes inside, maybe. You see it every day in our hospitals. The family members offer kindness through euthanasia. To you, it will say you killed your own father. But this kindness, which was your core value, you have put it into the application for the larger cause. And therefore now from outside, you will be a killer. But actually your father is blessing you, saying, please, thank you, because there is no scope, and the doctors are also telling no scope, and it's happening all over hospitals. Those who are doctors on the group or aware of from their family, they are aware of these things. It is a reality. You have done that to your most loved ones. And so how do you do that is you really need to strengthen that narrative, the law of recognition, of recognizing yourself. You need to bring in your core values. We really need to make a narrative out of it. From that, we have to make a purpose, and then we say everything is good. So that's why when you are in the dark, we do not know what to do, we refer to that. This is our code for ourselves. And so I have taken a principled decision. When you're lost, you read your own made Bible. Don't read any other Bible. It's your own made Bible. This will serve you. It will help you, give you direction. It will anchor you. Otherwise, you will go where the wind goes.
That's great. Thank you. So just to summarize, you're saying values are more important than inner voice. Inner voice is confusing.
Inner voice is a very good mariner's compass. It tells you if you are going wrong. In fact, it is a conscience which comes in. But that's what I told you, that conscience is there. Of course, that's why I'm not killing my father on the first port of call. I'm borrowing and paying for it. Even though he's suffering, I'm borrowing. But when I know it's, now I'm doing injustice to him. So therefore, I'll have to accept this sin and deliver justice to my family by letting him go. It's not my first port of call. My inner voice is telling me I'm no more in the north, I'm going somewhere. And therefore, then you focus on this. Inner voice, do not give it away. That's your conscience. It's allowing you to give it a second thought. Your Mahabharata was the last port of call, not the first.
Even I have a question.
Sorry?
Thank you.
I have a question. My name is Kumar Banerjee. See, there is a, with CSR, government has tried to codify, social responsibilities. Can something like that be done with this, how you can actually act in cases of trouble, all these things? Can it be done that way? Because this is the time, this is a COVID time, when a lot of business principles are up for discussion.
Very good question you have asked, Sumoji. My observation from many years is that we love to talk of the government. My whole talk was based on government. And if you understood my talk, I was telling you that now you are the government and show me what you are going to do. So what I am asking you, forget the government forcing CSR upon you. I am asking you, the most important element in your company is the team alignment, and therefore trusting each other. Can you codify trust in your company? Can you say you all have to trust each other? Here's the law. Here's the rule number 4 of the company. You cannot. Correct? So you got your own answer. That what government is doing, you forget that. No. What they are doing, we should not focus on what they, now that is the law. That is what it is. I would say with the balanced things, you try to run your business and do whatever. So I never argue with laws. I never argue with, there's a very famous line that I may be not be able to say it verbatim, but God give me the strength to change things which I can, humility to leave things alone which I cannot, and wisdom to know the difference. So what government is doing, you cannot change. Don't waste time complaining, because that narrative we don't want only anywhere. You don't complain about anything. Even when the Titanic was sinking, it's a true story. They were playing music there, and people with guns had offered this boats to women and children, and therefore the death was minimal. It was a very peaceful transition at a time because the negative narrative never took the grip on the ship. Can you imagine that? It is not some men trying to flirt and holding chairs and opening doors, trying to show chivalry. This was life and death. But in that narrative, that situation, someone came with a very powerful narrative. And people are looking for narratives, and your job is to set the narratives. And your narrative, you see, it's not what you say, it's how you occur. Okay, Sumoji? And how people perform, there's a law of performance. People perform on how you occur. And how you occur arises in the language. And a future positive based language can transform how people perform. Are you understanding? Very, very powerful. It's never what we say, it's how we occur to them. It's how it lands on their ears. That is very important for us.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Kevin, you are getting very interesting question, but unfortunately, due to paucity of time, will not be able to take all questions. What I done, I had shared your number over chat box. So if anyone have any question, you can directly get in touch with Kevin Shah. And Kevin, I have one question, one last question. Okay. You are leaving all of us with a very important question in mind, that is regarding the farmer agitation. And I'm asking this question without prejudice to any of the current political parties. If you were to be a prime minister, okay, handling the farmer agitation, you may choose to answer this question or not. Completely, you're right. What you have done?
No, it is not a fair question. It is not a fair question. What is my answer? You know already, based on my writings and all those things. So tell me not who you are. What you are shouts loud and clear at me. You have already with your Bluetooth absorbed the thing, so you know what my answer is. But it is not fair to ask this question because I will never be able to sit in the prime minister's position. I would say that those people say, the right wingers will say he should have fired that. If you ask the opposition, they should say he should not fire. Right wingers will say he should fire. Therefore, actually, prime minister has done injustice to everybody. It's a nota vote. Because even the right wingers he is not satisfied. As an example, those who believe in nationalism and believe that the central authority is in the institutions, because the people are like sheep, they don't know what to take care of, and therefore the powerful central institutions from where the power should emanate, they will say that anything which is challenging the institution in thought or in physical structure built over the years is being destroyed, then they should be stopped. The point is, prime minister did not fire. So we are not in his shoes. We will never be able to understand that. So even to a most right winger person, his vote is saying this prime minister is good for nothing. He did not do what he's saying.
Thank you, Kevin. Over to you, Rahul.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. It's always a delight to hear to you, and even today you didn't disappoint us. I would just say that you made taking tough decisions look so easy. So before giving to Rajiv for the final vote of thanks, I would just, with your kind permission, Kevin, I would like to announce something. We are delighted to announce that Kevin's son has started his own restaurant by the name of Plural. It caters to Southeast Asian cuisine at Kalagoda Fort, Mumbai. Currently, due to COVID, they are not starting it physically, but just delivering orders. But soon they will commence, and we assure you, Kevin, we tenors will be one of the earliest visitors to Plural. So congrats from our side and wishing you all the best. So now, Rajiv, over to you for the formal vote of thanks, and then I will make my concluding remarks. So request participants to just bear for 2 more minutes and don't leave the session. Yes, over to you, Rajiv.
Rahul, am I audible?
Yes,
yes, very much.
Yeah.
Very much.
Good afternoon, friends. It has been a very powerful session by Kevin. Kevin has been a successful entrepreneur. And in this 1 hour talk, he has brought in a lot of pertinent points for us to ponder. I can just think back of 20 years back when we had the Mahabharata playing on the TV sets every Sunday afternoon. The last line of the opening song is Dharma Samsapanarthaya Sambhavani Yuge Yuge. So like he made those few thoughts that Sam Dam Dandaved or Lakir Ke Fakir or ethics, principles and morals. It has made all of us to think on all those lines, and the examples starting from the loaf of bread to Abraham Lincoln to Ram Rajya and Krishna Rajya. So all of us have really started thinking on those lines. We as entrepreneurs, businessmen, and professionals. So this has been a really very powerful and wonderful talk by you, Kevin. Thank you so much for making us start our mind rattling again and to see how we take business decisions. And the most important question is why for everything if we start questioning ourselves. Thank you so much, Kevin. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank all 10 members who have been present during this session. And most important, all the visitors who have been present throughout the sessions and shared their thoughts and questions for this session. Thank you once again for this session. Thank you. I hand it over back to Rahul.
Yeah, thanks, Rajiv. I will make my concluding remarks now and then we will end the meeting. So friends, what you saw today is what 10 members share every week. Positive energy, knowledge about what's happening in the industry, support to any operational problem that is beyond our domain expertise, opportunity to learn from and mentor fellow entrepreneurs. An added benefit is a chance to attract a lot of business. So who should join 10 and why? Budding and established entrepreneurs are welcome to join 10. 10 is committed to support, promote, and develop entrepreneurs, and our activities are focused on building the entrepreneurial community. So please take a call on becoming a part of 10. Annual membership is rupees 15,000 and 2,000 is one-time membership. Registration fees. So thank you all for attending and making such a positive contribution to the meeting. We end this meeting. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you all the participants and the 10 members. All the best to all of you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.